Welcome to this series on Beingfulness. I'm Professor Nidumolu, a clinical professor of organizational behavior at Indian School of Business. I almost said Indian Institute of Management, which was my alma mater. But I'm at the Indian School of Business, a professor of OB. And with me is Pavitra, my colleague. Pavitra, go ahead, say a line or two about yourself.
Hello, I'm Pavitra. I'm the research assistant that works with Professor Nidumolu on leadership and strategy a little bit. But I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for including me. I think today we just want to know a little bit about what you do, what are you studying, what is your main area of research, and what is beingfulness that we've heard you speak about in the past.
And I thought who best to start with, but my own, the people who've been working most closely with me. Pavitra is one, and later on I'll be introducing Shubhangi, another research associate, and we'll be talking about having a conversation on what is beingfulness. A difficult concept, but we'll try and sort of work it out. What does it mean for us? So let's begin with beingfulness. Right? This is something I've been thinking about for a while, and honestly, I'm still not very clear about it. But to me, it seems that it's three key concepts tied together. Three concepts that were very important in ancient Indian wisdom. The first, of course, is our core self, who we are at our core, the authentic part of us, the true part of us, and we call it being. Philosophers have called it being. In ancient Indian wisdom, it was called the Atma, the self. So that's one key component of it. And we've discussed purpose or Dharma. That's something. And let me ask you, what does it mean to you, Pavitra?
Dharma, purpose. It's something that, to me personally, is something that's beyond what I see on an everyday basis, something that keeps me motivated, gets me through the harder times, just to have something else to focus on and to keep me centered.
Absolutely.
That.
You use the word centered. And that's really critical. In the last 2 years, people have not been centered. The whole crisis, the pandemic, has thrown us off center, off balance. And in that sense, beingfulness is an attempt to center people in a sense of purpose. Dharma is what originally meant that, something innate to you. And Dharma is a word or a concept. Really, it's a concept that has many, many interpretations. But Dharma originates in an even older word or concept called Rita. And Rita meant order in the universe, the cosmic order. And Dharma in that sense is both the innate order that is within us and outside us, also a sense of duty. And when you mentioned centering, that's centering in that innate aspect of us, that which is true to us. So that's the second key concept in beingfulness. The third, of course, is work. And we are caught up in work. We just work all day long and all night long sometimes. Right? So work is just taken over. And in many ways, the modern lifestyle is so dominated by work that you do have people saying enough is enough. You've heard of the Great Resignation,
right.
And we've talked about it.
Yes.
Is this something, you've mentioned to me that you've been in settings
where
work was difficult.
Yes.
What was it like?
I think there was a point through the pandemic especially where I had the opportunity to realize how different I was personally from the kind of work I was being asked to do and the setting in which I was working as well. And something inside me just wanted to do something that was more meaningful to me, something that gave me a little more fulfillment at the end of the day. And everything comes at a cost. It did come at a cost, but it just felt like if I don't take this decision now, I probably won't get the opportunity to shift gears again later in life.
And how many people must have been in that situation?
Yes.
Really millions of people.
Yes.
This is not the work I want to do. This is not true to me. I'm not happy here. I don't find it meaningful. And in that sense, beingfulness is for those kinds of situations, for people who are looking for that kind of alignment between work, which of course is called karma, and purpose, a sense of purpose, what you want your life to be, which is dharma, and yourself, what is true to you, your Atma. So that's what beingfulness is. How do you align the three, Atma, Karma, Dharma, and to what end? Now you mentioned you felt it was not, what was missing? What were you looking for?
it just felt like a very mundane set of tasks rather than something that made me get excited or happy about it. And I think that is what I was looking for, something that felt a little more meaningful.
Meaningful. Yeah.
But Professor, do we need something like the COVID crisis to reflect on this? How can we make it more relevant every day? Like, how can this be a sustainable thing for ourselves?
That is the challenge. We don't want crises, and that too really existential crises like this, to wake us up in a way. We want it to be, every day, a kind of belief in it, a feeling of it, and to be grounded in it all day, and not just wait for the crisis to come around. And that's hopefully what we will do. We together will create hopefully a body of work and practices that allow people to practice it even when the crisis is not there.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping, that through beingfulness, which I guess we can define as, yes, that alignment between yourself, your purpose, and your work, that leads to what you were saying, that sense of flourishing, right? That internal flourishing and balance or harmony. And not to forget the external harmony. I think that's something we've forgotten. I think in some ways capitalism has been wonderful to humanity, but there have been some real downsides to it. And some downsides are climate change, this kind of growing inequality between the rich and the poor, and that's only spreading. In fact, there's work that suggests that it will probably keep spreading.
Right.
So ensuring that those things are reduced, people are more content at work, people use work as a means to fulfill what they care about. And so that's what hopefully we'll be able to create these practices.
Right.
And you're right, it's something that we should make part and parcel for everyday life.
Right.
And not wait for a crisis. So that's really what beingfulness is. Whenever I talk of beingfulness to people, the question that often comes up is, how does this differ from mindfulness? I'm sure you faced that question also.
Yes.
I'm sure maybe when you first heard of beingfulness, was that the kind of thing you're thinking of?
Yes, I thought it was an extension to the idea of mindfulness because it encouraged reflection and self-awareness and a deeper sense of understanding yourself and what is happening around you. But over time, as I studied it with you more, I realized the differences a little more.
And what are some of these that you've become aware of?
I think one thing that I found about beingfulness is that it keeps you rooted within your reality. You stay within the context of the things you're dealing with, whether it is work or life or home. And mindfulness to me seemed like a break from reality into self-reflection. I could be wrong in the way I've interpreted these things, but that's how it seems to me.
Very interesting.
But I'd love to hear from you what
so yes, they're related. They're very closely connected. I see them as almost two sides of the same coin, right? That one exists only in the presence of the other. But there are some differences. And, let's go back to those three, the triumvirate that define beingfulness. One was the self. And mindfulness comes from a tradition, going back to ancient Buddhism, that does not recognize the self, the non-self doctrine. And if it does, in the Mahayana Buddhism, it is seen as an empty self. Whereas beingfulness comes from, I would say, the Vedanta tradition of the Upanishads. And there is the notion of a core self, a universal self, that is a full self, that is an eternal self, and that's being. So it recognizes being explicitly. So that's one big difference. So in that sense, you could define beingfulness as much more about the nature of reality. And the word for that is ontological. It's not your psychological state of mind. It's not just your psychological state.
Okay.
Mindfulness at some level is about awareness and your psychological state.
Right.
Beingfulness is one level deeper, about the nature of reality itself. What is real, what is not real. And in that sense is ontological. Because it goes to the question of who you are.
Right.
That is not a question mindfulness tries to address, who you are.
Right.
It is about how you respond to what is happening to you. The non-judgmental, in-the-moment response to events and things and thoughts and so on. But it is not about your core identity. Beingfulness is.
Right.
And that follows then the whole notion of purpose. Now, what is your sense of purpose in life? What do you want to achieve? Going beyond the present moment into the future, that also is a part of beingfulness. And not a central part of mindfulness, because mindfulness is in the present.
Okay.
So purpose is a critical part. Purpose that ties together everything that happened to you in the past, what's happening to you in the present, in a sense of where you want to go in the future.
Okay.
And the third is work, karma. And how you approach work, that's where there's a lot of similarity. Mindfulness would say, take your work really in the moment, non-judgmental. Beingfulness would add some other aspects to it. Your whole self, the needs of the whole self, example. Since the self is critical to beingfulness, the self has a whole set of needs. Are those needs being met at work? Those issues come up. So really on each of those three that we said, there's one other thing which is also important. Mindfulness at some level is about acceptance. Accept the world as it is, right? Non-judgmental acceptance. Beingfulness is more, I would even say it's an agent of change. It is an activist way of life. It is about restoring that harmony if it is not there. It is about being an activist. You could almost say liberation theology, which was part of the old church faith. Is that element of liberation is a key part of beingfulness. Don't just be content with where you are. See climate change, inequality. These are things that you should do something about. Anchored in your being, therefore unafraid. But you become an agent of change. And not accepting, in that sense, challenging the status quo. That's a critical part of beingfulness. You should see yourself as an agent of change. And to what purpose? To enable that external harmony. And that happens if you're aware of the internal harmony in you. So it's, at some level you have to be internally harmonized, and then you use that externally, create that harmony. So these are some major differences. But really, they are needed for each other. And they are complementary. Does that make sense, or is it just gobbledygook?
No. It makes sense. I think I see it more as beingfulness being the bridge that leads from self-awareness and regulation to action and application within the context itself.
Absolutely. Actually, that's a good thing you mentioned. That is, it's a good way to think of it as a bridge. Bridge between some underlying reality, right? Some deep reality, whatever you call it. Ancient Indian wisdom, it was Brahman or Atman. In other religions, they have other terms for it. Right? And so it's a bridge between that underlying reality to this world of the present. And it's interesting you mention it that way, because in the ancient texts, of course, I want to emphasize also, beingfulness is not just one religion based. Although it derives something from the Upanishads, it is more universal in nature. The search for being, understanding what being is a search across all ancient societies and civilizations. So it is not confined just to Hinduism. But I just want to mention that in the Upanishads, for example, the Atman is thought of as the bridge. It is the bridge that connects this world to the other world. So the notion of a bridge is very central. So it's a key part of the concept of the two worlds connected by Atman. So yes, and it's a bridge to the present moment, which is mindfulness. It's a bridge to the past. It's a bridge to your hopes and aspirations. And it's a bridge across generations, which is where the emphasis on nature and reducing climate change is very critical. But yes, there's a lot more to it. And in this series, we want to explore some of these other aspects of beingfulness. We'll sort of systematically go through beingful leadership. We'll look at beingful work. We'll be looking at what is a beingful organization. Because in the end, the biggest agents of change are really organizations. So we'll be studying that, beingful organizations. And hopefully we'll explore it together. With you and then Shubhangi explore through our research efforts. Thank you.